be able to address the questions you guys are looking for. So I'll give you a short, this is what I'm here to do today, give you a short, very brief history of money and how we came to be where we are today and what kind of options we have today. Could everybody read this clearly? Subjective, objective, universal, and ledger? I hope so. I'm sorry if my writing's messy, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you guys on a history of how we got to where we are today. So this is 100K stands for 100,000 years ago, and then 25K stands for 25,000 years ago, 5K stands for 5,000 years ago. So we're just going to slowly go from the past to the present, and I'm going to talk about the future a bit. But, okay.
Do you want to record?
I already started, but like I said, I'm just going to edit the parts.
Easier.
Yeah, don't worry. Okay, so the way money first started, let me ask you guys, does anyone want to try to take a guess of how money was created and how it came to be? Yes, sir.
It's created from a factory.
Created from a factory? Okay, and we'll let you. Yes, sir.
It was created because so everything's not free.
That's a good answer. Yes, sir.
It was created because people needed a currency to pay for their retails and everything.
That's good. He said we needed a currency. And you? Okay. Yes.
You learned the Muslim Canada?
No. Hopefully one day.
Not yet.
Manners.
Okay, so you guys are mostly right for the most part, but the way we were taught money was created and the way money came to be was through the barter system. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Barter? Who wants to try to take a guess at
Hands out,
explaining it?
please.
Okay, you explain.
Trading?
Trading what? So how would it work, this system? Okay, you've seen.
Okay, so one person has something, and then they say so you want to barter for this for that, and then if the guy agrees, then you barter and it's like trading.
Exactly. So if I have 5 apples, you have 5 oranges, and we both felt like trading 5 apples and 5 oranges was fair, that was what happened. It was whatever we thought was fair and whatever was good enough for us. But we found better ways throughout the years. But but the way it actually started, it wasn't the barter system, it was just called the subjective ledger. All subjective means is that it's opinions and it's not facts. It's not true. So these are just what people believe. So they were opinions. So at the beginning, a long time ago, when there were just tribes, tribes needed a way to transact with each other and make exchanges. So what the first money system was, what the first type of money was a subjective ledger, which meant we would lend to each other. We would have to remember. So say we killed a buffalo, because that's what happened back then, it was hunting and gathering. So someone killed a buffalo, and whoever had the buffalo would obviously have to give meat to members of his tribe. But he would have to remember who he gave meat to. That's the subjective part. It's not facts. They didn't use anything facts-based to make trades. They just had to remember who owed each other what. So it started with, we had a debt, and we were trying to find the best way to pay each other back. But at the beginning, it was just remembering. It was just lending. I would just remember that I paid you this much, and you remember that you owed me this much, and that's all there was. But it wasn't a very good ledger. So around 25,000 years ago, when tribes, they started wanting to trade with other tribes. So they needed something in common. You know, each tribe had something different. So they needed something in common to trade with each other. So we got to the objective ledger. Does anybody want to try and guess what objective means?
More tribes started using the money and stuff.
Yes.
Like how when you said that they traded, they could ask
Yeah, so what objective means is it's facts. I was saying subjective is not facts, so they had to remember. But when the objective ledger started, they didn't have to remember anymore. They used something facts, they used something real that they could all feel and they all knew. And it was called collectibles. it was a very brilliant technology, and it took off right away. And not long after, any tribe, any civilization, you would find using collectibles as money, as a way to keep track of debt, as a way to keep track of who owed each other what. So it could have been anything, but whatever it was in the tribe's environment, it was scarce. Does anyone know what scarce means? Yes, sir.
Rare?
Pardon? Rare. Yes, exactly. Rare. So scarce had to be rare in the environment, hard to find. And the main reason why it had to be scarce, guys, was because if it wasn't scarce, if it was just tree leaves, anyone can pick tree leaves at the benefit of themselves, for the benefit of themselves at the expense of everyone else. So you guys know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because if tree leaves was used as a ledger, anyone could just go around picking tree leaves and say, I have this much money. But that's not a good ledger because anyone can do that, and it just wouldn't make sense in the long run. So what they used something that was scarce, it was rare in the environment and hard to come by, but it also had to have 5 attributes. And these 5 attributes are that it was durable, meaning it didn't decay or corrode, like it didn't lose value over time. It was durable, it was divisible, it could be divided easily, it was portable, it could be moved around easily, recognizable, and the last one is fungible, which just means it can be changed into something else. So we use money today, but it can be exchanged for goods like food or services or something like that, but it can always be changed back to money. So it just means it's interchangeable. Those are the 5 attributes. So that's why the technology around 25,000 years ago, you found tribes using collectibles because they were scarce and they had 5 attributes. This was a successful technology and it took off, and any tribe you found around that time or civilization was using these collectibles. And it could have been anything. People used salt, people used beads, they used seashells, rocks even, whatever was scarce in the environment for them. So now we're coming closer to today. Around 5,000 years ago, we finally came up with a universal ledger. Because before, we only had an objective ledger, but there were all these tribes, and sooner or later these tribes wanted to trade with other tribes. So when these tribes wanted to trade with other tribes, they needed a common ledger. They needed something in common that everyone understood as scarce. And the ledger that emerged as a universal ledger around 5,000 years ago was gold. Everybody knows what gold is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So gold emerged as a universal ledger around 5,000 years ago. And even though it was a universal ledger around 5,000 years ago, I'll explain to you guys later how it's kept its value better than some of the other universal ledgers we have used up until now. What I mean by that is, even though gold came out about 5,000 years ago, we've had other universal ledgers that was paper. It wasn't gold. So it wasn't universally scarce, and it didn't have the 5 attributes, but we still used it as a universal ledger. And that was after gold. But even though gold was before that, it is still today considered the best universal ledger. It has kept value the best over time. So some other universal ledgers that have existed after gold is paper currency. You guys use it today, right? It's paper, but do you guys think right now paper is a good universal ledger considering all the other ledgers we've talked about? Do you think paper is universally scarce in the world right now? No, right? Do you think paper has those 5 attributes about being durable, divisible, portable, recognizable, and fungible? It doesn't. It's not close to being as good as a ledger as gold, but we've still used it. So that should kind of tell you guys something, is why why were we using other universal ledgers? And the best answer is we don't have the internet like we do today. We can't find out everything. We were just taught that this is the way to transact. We were just taught that this is the way the world works. But
I think the problem with paper money is you can print it off, and you could, like a lot of times people just printed off lots of money to get the way out of the recession. So because they're printed off, the value is there. It's not scarce. It's not rare.
That's 100% correct. I was about to touch on that later, but that is the reason why, and that is what's happening today. Unfortunately, not everyone has a say in how is money created and how it's distributed. There's certain powers that have a say on how it's created and how it's distributed, like the government and other governments. So that is what's happening. They print money, like I was talking about. They would print tree leaves, or they would gather a bunch of tree leaves, but not everyone else was able to gather these tree leaves. So they were printing money for themselves at the expense of everyone else. So to give you an example, right now the world's universal ledger is the US dollar. And the US dollar, they're kind of selfish that they're printing money for themselves, but it's affecting the rest of the world because you just see it. There's privileged people and there's unprivileged people, and there's a huge divide. But unfortunately, there's a lot more unprivileged versus privileged. So this is why I'm here today, just to kind of introduce you guys about Bitcoin, which is an alternative for this paper currency. So you guys will have a choice at the end of today if you want to use a better universal ledger, or you want to keep using the paper money universal ledger. And if you want to keep using Bitcoin as a ledger, all that's going to do is that's going to even out the privileged versus unprivileged. It's going to make things even, and sooner or later, everyone's going to have a say in what's valuable. Does that make sense? Okay. So.
My only issue with Bitcoin is because it's a limited supply, unless you're in now, it's going to be only the rich that can buy it.
Well, the thing is that, yes, there's a limited supply, but the way it's released into the ecosystem, it makes it a deflationary currency, which means that it only will gain value over time. So, yes, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, like your teacher's saying, but they're not, nobody can access them right now. These 21 million Bitcoins are released into the ecosystem, and what I mean by that is they're released on the internet. If someone wants to, there's multiple ways you can get Bitcoin. You can buy them, get them for a service you use, but another way is called mining. And all mining does is that it verifies the transactions that happen on the network. And so, network is like the internet. Everybody uses the internet, and all the Bitcoin transactions happen are on the internet, but people have to verify them. So it can be anyone, and what they do is, it's called mining. Like, the reason why it's called mining is like gold. It takes energy to mine, and you get a reward. So that's what Bitcoin is like. You use energy, your computer energy, to mine, and you get a reward. Now this reward, it's halved every 4 years. So if you're mining Bitcoin, and when you're verifying transactions, if you get lucky, you'll mine a transaction and you'll receive Bitcoin. At the beginning it was 25 Bitcoins when it first started back in 2009. But every 4 years after that, it became half the reward you would get from mining. So every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that gets released is halved, which would only make it more valuable over time. You know what I mean?
So, like 2 Bitcoins are released every 4 years?
So,
is that what halving means, or are you multiplying by 2?
Dividing by 4. So at the beginning, it was 25. When Bitcoin first started, 25 Bitcoins is what a miner would get for being lucky while verifying transactions. 4 years after that, the reward was only 12.5 Bitcoin.
So they got paid less.
So they got paid less. But they were still incentivized. I mean, they were still given a reason to verify the network because, yes, the Bitcoin is only half, but it's still there. It's still used as an incentive for people to verify the network and make it safe and secure. But every 4 years, that value gets halved, which would only make Bitcoin more valuable over time. And the 21 million Bitcoins that there will ever be, the end of it will be around 2050. So it's quite a while from now. So that means that it's going to take quite a bit of time before all the Bitcoin has been released into the ecosystem. Now, also something that's positive about what your teacher said is she said, if there's only 21 million Bitcoins, that means rich people.
1 million pieces of gold.
21 million pieces of gold, like that. That means anyone could buy Bitcoin right now if they thought it was a good idea. But honestly, what's happening, guys, is the universal ledger right now is paper money. Whoever uses paper money, it's the governments. The governments use paper money. The nations of the world, they use paper money, and they're not going to be using Bitcoin anytime soon because they rely on paper money. Everything in their life happens with paper money, and it just seems like something. It just seems like something ridiculous for them to start using Bitcoin because that would go against everything they've worked for, everything they've built. So they're trying really hard and doing everything they can to hold on to this paper money, this universal ledger. So they're
Because
not.
they can control the supply, and if they do internet money, then it's left to the people to control the supply and demand.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's actually very. They're trying to do everything they can to distract people about Bitcoin, and unfortunately, the people who have most of the money in the world and the power, they control the media. So that means they control what you guys see and hear. So there's actually been quite a bit of negative information about Bitcoin since it came out because they're trying, once again, to distract people from the true value of it. So let me just give you a couple of examples of some other paper currencies before I continue. So yeah, 5,000 years ago we had gold. It was the best universal ledger. But before that, around 500 years ago, we had other reserve currencies that we used instead of gold. First it started with the Portuguese. They had their own reserve currency that the whole world thought of as the universal ledger. And then, sorry, I thought you had your hand up. And then there was, there's the Dutch, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, and then the British. But now it's the US dollar that is the world's reserve currency. But all of these were paper currencies, and throughout all that time, they went through a phase of printing more money and then crashing. Their economy crashed, like your teacher said, and there was bad times. It was really hard to get food, and that country didn't have the same resources as other countries might have. But it went from one country to another. Whatever country probably had the biggest army and the most power. But it was never, even though there were other reserve universal ledgers, world reserve currencies, after gold, gold had always been the best because it was universally scarce and it had those 5 attributes. The paper currency, it wasn't universally scarce. Anyone could have printed the money. So that was where the problem was. Now, I know gold, I said it was the best universal ledger, but there are some faults with gold, and there are some things that doesn't make it a great universal ledger. And I'll tell you why Bitcoin just solved those problems. But before I can go on, I just want to quickly go over 3 myths about money that you guys have to understand before I can continue. Everybody knows what a myth is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first myth is that money was born out of barter. But it wasn't born out of barter. It was just born because it was a way of keeping track of debt. We needed to keep track of debt somehow. So that was the way money was created. The government didn't create it, nothing like that. There was just a time where humans and tribes needed a way to keep track of debt. The second myth is that money is backed by an asset. So some people might have said that oh well, the US dollar was backed by gold. That implies, that means they're trying to say that gold has some sort of value that sets it apart from any other ledger, that makes it special. But really, gold was just used for power back then, and everybody just recognized it as being universally scarce. But all it ever was just a ledger. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't different from any of the other collectibles. It was just that it was universally scarce and it was used as a ledger. The third myth and the last one is that money is government sponsored. So some people might think that government created money and things like that, but actually the way money came about was out of a social need. People needed a way to transact with each other, and that's how money came about.
Sorry, could they take a 2-second break to stretch?
Yeah.
Listening, you guys okay?
I just want to say you guys are doing really good so far at listening. I remember being in grade 5, and I remember being 50 as well, so bear with me. We're almost over, and I think this is cool for you guys, because by the end of this, any one of you guys, how many of you guys have cell phones right now?
What?
Oh my gosh.
I don't.
How many of them are smartphones? Just to let you guys know, how old do you think I was when I got my first cell phone? I'm 26 now. I was 18 when I got my first cell phone. And it was a flip phone. It wasn't even a smartphone. Or anything.
I was 36 when I got my first cell phone.
So all I was saying by that.
May I have your attention? You'll have an opportunity to ask your questions at your end. If you can just be quiet for about 10 more minutes. Thank you.
So the only reason why I was saying that is because any of you guys can download an app after this, and you download a Bitcoin wallet. It's not a physical wallet, it's a wallet that you have on your phone where you can store Bitcoin and transact Bitcoin. And the way you transact it is through QR codes. You guys have probably seen QR codes. You know, on a bus stop where it's like black and white squares and you scan it and you kind of get taken to a website. But with Bitcoin, when you want to send someone money, a QR code comes up on your phone and they scan the QR code, and that's how you make the transaction. It's digital, it's over the internet. It's not physically handing each other money, but once you guys understand how it works, it's just as good, if not better. So that's just something to look forward to. But let me quickly finish off. I just want to quickly remind you guys again the importance of gold today. So I was mentioning that there were other reserve currencies, but if you had back when there was other reserve currencies, if you took $100 of that money, that paper money, and you kept it today, it would be different than if you guys had $100 worth of gold and still kept it today. Does that make sense? Like, if you had $100 of paper money back then, that might be someone's yearly income, a year's worth of money. But if you had $100 worth of gold back then versus now, you'll still have that person's yearly income, but if you had the paper money, it wouldn't be the person's yearly income, and it'd still just be $100. That makes sense, right?
So gold keeps change value. Gold keeps
Its value.
Yeah, whereas money changes, okay? Yeah, that $100 might be worth $10 today, and gold might be worth $50,000 today because it's the right ledger.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why gold is important. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare gold versus Bitcoin. I'm going to explain. I know I said gold has been the best universal ledger today, but there are some. It's not perfect. There are some things that make it bad. So one of the things is that I know I said gold was scarce, it was universally scarce, but actually today we mine more and more gold every day, and it actually takes a lot of money and energy, because if you think about it, it's very primitive. You know, we spend millions of dollars to mine gold and take it out of the ground, and then we just lock it in vaults. So in that way, it's not a great universal ledger. Also in terms of portability, so moving money around, anytime you guys have to move gold around, so that means right now, me and your teacher, we can exchange gold with each other in the same room, or let's just say it's paper money. But gold and paper money is the same thing in the sense that you always need to trust a third party. That means you always need to trust someone else, whether it's a government or a bank, in order to make that transaction outside of the room. But inside the room, it's great. Me and her can just stand here, walk up to each other, exchange $100, and the transaction's done. But anytime we're outside of a room and we want to exchange money with each other, you have to trust a third party.
Sort of like when you're going on vacation, you have to get that money exchanged. And you have to pay the bank some money to get that money exchanged.
So that was another thing that was bad about it, is that you always had to trust a third party anytime you wanted to make a transaction outside of the room. And the last thing that's bad about gold is divisibility. Gold, I don't know if you guys know this, but gold, it can actually be melted, and other metals can be melted and added to that gold. And then that same gold at the beginning, it can take shape to being hard again, but it won't have the same value. It won't be all gold. It might be some gold and some copper, or some gold and some silver. So,
Sorry, when I think of jewelry buying, when I think of that, I'm sure a lot of you get 18-karat gold gifts for your birthdays. Some of us get 10-karat golds, and they've mixed it with a lot of things, and the 10-karat gold is much cheaper than the 18-karat gold. That's because it has less gold in it. But you wouldn't know when you're trading actual gold, right? Did you see a yellow gold?
and I mean, luckily nowadays we have 10K, 18K to know that there's actually, it's not the best value of gold. But back then, there's no way we could tell whether the gold we were getting had anything else in it. It still weighed the same. It was very hard to tell. So that was another thing that's bad with it. So there's something wrong with the scarcity of it, meaning it's very primitive. We still mine more gold every day. The portability of it, we always had to trust a third party, and the divisibility of gold is not good because you can change it into other kinds of money. So enter Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a universal ledger that serves as a digital currency. So I have talked about paper money and gold being a universal ledger, but Bitcoin is a universal ledger that's digital currency. So it's money on the internet, strictly on the internet. If you guys wanted to try to use Bitcoin without the internet, it couldn't happen. But who here thinks that the internet is going anywhere? Like, does anyone think that does anyone think that the internet's going to go away someday, like be taken down?
Really? And replaced by what?
Nothing.
Google.
That's not gonna Hands on top. No, you're not gonna be replaced by robots.
The only reason why I ask that is because the internet's not going to go anywhere, guys. We rely on the internet more and more every day, and contrary to what you guys might think, the internet, when the internet was created, it was also similar to Bitcoin. The governments, they didn't want internet to come about because it was similar in Bitcoin, that they understood it had a certain technology that wasn't going to go anywhere. So the internet, it was frowned upon at the beginning, but the reason why it's still here today is because of a social need. People needed to share information with each other. People outside, so back then you can share information with each other inside of a room, easy, no problem. But anytime you want to share information outside of a room, you need a third party. That's how the internet came to be today, because the world needed a way to share information without a third party. And the internet is not going to go anywhere because anyone can create it, anyone can start it up again and create their own internet. Yes, sir?
But it's not like the internet's been around forever. It's gonna have problems, like when things whack out and stuff.
It might be replaced by something better.
Exactly. The idea of the internet is not going to go anywhere. And you're right, you know, blackouts do happen, things like that do happen, but that's only for a temporary period of time, and a new internet can come up and maybe even better. So, but the idea of the internet is never going to go anywhere because people are always going to need to exchange information quickly with each other outside of a room. So that's not going to go anywhere. And the reason why Bitcoin is not going to go anywhere is because right now we need a way to transact with each other without trusting a third party. So inside a room is great, but anytime we want to transact with each other outside of a room, we have to trust a third party. And this is how banks came about, this is how governments came about. But now we don't have to trust a third party. As long as we trust the network and we trust how it works, we can use Bitcoin. Yes.
What do you do with it? Like that?
I'll
We want to
explain
know more about Bitcoin and your CryptoKidz.
Okay, I'll get to that in a second. So the difference between gold and Bitcoin. So the way Bitcoin is different is, even though you have to mine more and more gold every day, with Bitcoin, like your teacher said, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin ever. It's perfect mathematical scarcity, and that's actually the invention of Bitcoin, is that it's the first it's the first digital asset that is scarce. And the portability of Bitcoin, it can happen instantly. You don't need a third party. And the divisibility about Bitcoin is one Bitcoin can be divided into 1 million bits. So it's very easy to divide and interchange that way. Okay, so that's what Bitcoin is. It's a universal ledger that's digital, where you don't have to trust a third party to transact. You just need the internet, and that's it. So, to give you guys an example of what Bitcoin is, right now you guys all know about email, right?
Yes.
So, back when the internet first started, some people thought that email was the internet. You know, like they would go on their computer, try to send an email, and they thought that that was the internet. But that wasn't the technology behind the internet. It wasn't until the World Wide Web. You guys know what the World Wide Web is, right? Anytime you have to go to a website, you have to type in www.something. And that was called a browser. You guys know browser, right? You heard of browser? So with the browser, it became a lot easier to understand the internet and use the internet. So what the email was for the internet was the email was an application on the internet, on the www platform. Yeah, so the email was an app on the platform. And the browser, the World Wide Web, was the platform for the email. So some people, when it first came out, they thought that email was the internet, and this is the only thing you can do with the internet. But that wasn't true. It wasn't until the World Wide Web came out that you can really start doing things with the internet. Because the World Wide Web was just a platform that you can do other things with. And email was an application on that platform. So Bitcoin has its own platform too, and it's called the blockchain. So the blockchain is the network, like the browser was, and Bitcoin is the first app on the blockchain, like email was the first app on the browser. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And just to finish up, the reason why Bitcoin is special, and it is the best invention since the internet, is because the internet solved the problem, but what Bitcoin did is it solved two problems. Before Bitcoin, we had a problem that nobody could solve, which was called the double spending problem. Double spending problem was because anyone could print money. Anyone could spend, yeah, like your teacher was saying, governments, organizations, they could print money, but there was no way of knowing if they printed more money or they spent it twice. There was no way you could tell. It was very hard to tell. And the way Bitcoin solved that is that they created a public ledger. So I know I called Bitcoin a universal ledger. So what they did was they made a public ledger. They made it available to anyone to see how many transactions were made, for how much money, but you can't know exactly who made the transactions. It's just a string. It's just a string of numbers and letters and digits, about 20 characters long, and that's called a Bitcoin address. And that's how we can identify each other. So you have a Bitcoin address, I have a Bitcoin address. If we make a transaction, it goes up on the public ledger. But before, with paper money, if a transaction happened, there's no way any of us could know that that happened. But now, with Bitcoin, they created a public ledger that's on the internet. And like I was talking about before with mining, when you verify transactions, you're verifying this public ledger. You're making these transactions true, that they did happen for this amount of money, and that creates a safe ledger. Because before, there was no way to tell if someone else was printing more money or yeah. And the last one is called, it's kind of a mouthful, it's called the Byzantine generals problem. That just meant that on a network with the internet, there was no way for a group of people to, outside of a room, to agree on one thing. It was really hard for a group of people outside of a room to agree on something. But what Bitcoin solved was that a group of people can all agree on something. That means they can all agree on a Bitcoin transaction. They don't have to be in the same room. It's done with the internet. So that was something else. That was another problem Bitcoin solved. So it solved two major problems, and that's why it's so revolutionary, and that's why it's going to be a better universal ledger than gold and any of the paper money we've had so far. So just to finish up, I really mean it this time. I know I said it before, but this is the last thing I'm going to explain. There's three functions of money. Does anyone want to try to guess what the three functions of money are? Functions mean like what it's used for, what it can be used for, money. Yes. Buying stuff. Yes. Trading. Bills. Saving. Taxes. Yeah. Gambling. Yeah. There's a lot of functions. There's a lot of functions for money, but the three main functions are what's called store of value, payment mechanism, and unit of account. So money can be used to store for value, money can be used to make payments, and money can be used as a way to price things. And that's what we see today, right? You go to a store, you see that something is priced. We use money to make transactions. And we also use money to hold it and store it, hoping that it keeps the same value over time. And that's, right now with Bitcoin, we're going to go through stages. It's going to go through the store value stage, the payment mechanism stage, and then the unit of account stage. But right now in the world, we're still in the store of value stage. So there's only about 20 to 30 million people in the world right now that hold Bitcoin and use Bitcoin every day. But once we get to the payment mechanism, we're really going to see it take off. For example, everyone here has heard of Western money, right? Or sorry, Western Union?
Yeah.
Now, if I wanted to send money through Western Union, on average, they take 9% away from that transaction. So, and there are a lot of people that have family overseas and they want to send cross-border payments, or they might leave the country to work and want to send money home. But anytime they want to do that, they're always being taxed and a percentage is always being taken away. With Bitcoin, there's going to be no percentages taken away. You can send your amount of money for the full value and nothing's going to be taken away. You don't have to trust a third party, you don't have to trust anybody else. That's when I think it's really gonna take off, and when things start getting priced in Bitcoin, you're really gonna see it take off. And the future I see for Bitcoin is, I don't see it replacing other currencies or anything like that. I just see it being used as the universal ledger, the world's reserve currency. The world's reserve currencies right now and other paper money right now, they're not gonna go anywhere. They'll still be used, but Bitcoin will be the universal ledger, the best, because it's the best way to keep track of debt that we found. So that just means that Bitcoin will be more valuable than the paper currencies we still use today. But those paper currencies aren't going to go anywhere, those governments aren't going to go anywhere. Yes, sir.
How does Bitcoin initially get value?
So the way Bitcoin gets value is honestly how, if people give it value. So if people use it, that's what gives it value. The more people that hold it, that's what gives it value. So the more people that buy and hold it, like I was mentioning, the store of value state and then the payment mechanism.
I mean, originally, how did it get value?
The way it got value was just because enough people thought that it was valuable enough to use, so they used it. And once enough people started using it, it was used on a global scale. So right now, one Bitcoin, it's getting pretty close to being worth 1,000 Canadian dollars. And at the beginning, it was worth pennies, dollars. But the more people used it, the more it gained value.
I think it's on the stock market.
Okay. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions? You have your hand up.
How do you get, like,
So the way you get Bitcoin is by buying it from someone else, or if you have a service, say you can create a website or create a video, you can say, hey, I accept Bitcoin, and if people like your video, they can send you Bitcoin. You can also, like I talked about before, mining. You can verify transactions on the network. You set up something with your computer, and maybe through that way you can get Bitcoin. But honestly, the best way is just by buying it through someone else.
You can buy millions, you said, right?
Not yet.
No, millions.
Oh, yes. So one Bitcoin right now, even though it's worth even though it's worth almost 1,000 Canadian dollars, it's divisible into 1,000,000 bits. So you don't have to buy just one Bitcoin. You can buy like 0.001 Bitcoin, and that might be worth $50. So it's much easier. Yeah.
Can you be our teacher?
Very nice.
You mentioned that you wanted to start trading in Brampton or something?
Okay. All I want to do is I want to educate people about Bitcoin. That's literally it. It was created in 2009, and I found out about it in 2009. Ever since it came out, I knew what was going to happen. I firmly believed what was going to happen with it. So I've been studying it ever since then. So it's been about 8 years that I've been studying about Bitcoin, and all I want to do is teach people about it. That's it. And what your teacher was saying earlier, I don't want to make an agency or anything. I just want to start slowly forming a group. Whoever wants to join, whatever age, if they want to help other people, educate people about Bitcoin, then I'm all for it, hop on board, and that's all I want to do. But like your teacher said, in Brampton. I grew up in Brampton. I want it to happen in Brampton because you guys might not realize right now, but Brampton's a really great city. There's a lot of different cultures, and you guys can learn about different cultures, whereas in other cities, there might be just one culture or two cultures, and you can't learn a lot from each other that way because it's just harder. But this way, everyone learns a lot about each other, and you learn more things. And that's why I want to do it in Brampton. Yes? No. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins because the way Bitcoin was released, it was released like an app you would download on your phone. Does everybody know what software is?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what it was. It was software that was released into the ecosystem. And when this software was released, nobody controlled it. It was just put on the internet, and the only way it would work is if people used it. But enough people used it that it is what it is today. But when it was released, it said, the software said, it came with rules and instructions in the coding of it that said there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, and that's that. There'll never be more, there'll never be less. Nobody made it. So like I was saying, well, there was one person that created it in the sense that they had to create the software. They had to, have you guys ever heard of coding? Okay, so it's typing instructions into a computer, and that creates a program. When you type, whoever this person was, I don't know if it's a he, I don't know if it's a group of people, but he calls himself, or the group of people calls themselves Satoshi Nakamoto, and this Satoshi Nakamoto just freely gave away this software for anyone to download and anyone to use. So there's nobody that controls it. It's just an app on the internet. Yes.
How can we get educated with that?
Well, I'll write my email and my Twitter handle on the board today. And my Twitter handle, I'm always posting stuff about Bitcoin, strictly Bitcoin, and they're pretty informative things. But if you guys want to learn more, like anything specific, I'll give you my email and you can email me whenever you want, and I'll send
With
you
your parents'
links and
permission.
things like
Does that work for old folks too?
that. Anyway,
Is this anti-government?
it's not anti-government. What it is that it's another option. Right now, our only option is to use paper money. All Bitcoin is another option for us to use instead of paper money. And whoever thinks one will have more value, in the end, that one will have the most value and the most use cases. But I guess it is anti-government in the sense that it's another option.
Have you ever performed any transactions using Bitcoin?
Sorry?
Have you ever made a purchase or sold something using Bitcoin?
Yeah. It's like I said, there's 20 to 30 million people in the world right now that use it. It's not a lot, but it is enough that there's a community going around it. I made some